listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is October 18th, 2022, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host Jason Lucas. Jason, another fine Tuesday. How are you doing?
Spencer, hello. Welcome to the final week of Season 4.
Oh, my goodness.
I guess just a little disclaimer at the top here. We're recording this about noontime on the 18th, and servers are in a very long maintenance today. So, just to set the stage here, we haven't been into the game yet today. And in case any news breaks this week or later today, we are currently unaware of it because we don't have a patch release date yet. It's kind of, I think a lot of people just assumed like, okay, the season's ending, that means patch. Not necessarily. We do have a release candidate on PTR, so that's a good sign, but sometimes a release candidate can be on PTR for more than 1 week.
Yeah.
There's precedent for all of that. So until there's official blue text that says the patch is coming out on the 25th, we just, we don't know and we can't assume that. But either way, it's exciting, obviously, but it's also kind of weird because we're sort of like crashing into a brick wall here with the end of the season. And once patch comes out, like all of our gear and stuff is going to change and the talent system and everything. So it is a very strange kind of space that we exist in this week and potentially next week.
Yeah, if whatever week the pre-patch does drop, will certainly be a week that if you're a raid team that normally does stuff on Tuesdays, you may want to give your team an extra day off. You might want to try and see if there's any other day that you could do that raid on, because that anyone who gets home from work and logs in to go to raid or home from school or whatever it is going to have quite the setup time for figuring stuff out. Yes, there'll be default sort of ways to spend your points that'll be out there that people will be able to spend them very quickly, but there's still going to be a certain amount of muscle memory relearning, and there'll be a very different look and feel to the game, so it'll be something that will take some getting used to, and I think it'd be wise to give people that extra little bit of time to figure things out if your team is able to do so. It is going to be an exciting time in WoW, though, whenever pre-patch hits, you start to sort of get that, oh, we're so close, and oh my goodness, all the new things, and I can't wait to check them all out. But before we dive too deep into the World of Warcraft, it is important that we mention things going on around the peoples who make the games that we love. And there is a bit of ABK news this week, as I believe, Jason, another lawsuit has been laid.
You're not going to believe this, but Activision Blizzard is getting sued for sexual battery, sexual harassment, failure to prevent harassment, gender discrimination, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The plaintiff is seeking compensation and punitive damages and the removal of CEO Bobby Kotick, basically with the argument being that Bobby Kotick had awareness of sexual harassment, like endemic sexual harassment and abuse in the workplace, and failure to act on them. So the plaintiff is suing Activision Blizzard and former employee Miguel Vega. Activision Blizzard responded to the news making the press and said that we take all employee concerns seriously. When the plaintiff reported her concerns, we immediately opened an investigation, and Mr. Vega was terminated within 10 days. We have no tolerance for this kind of misconduct. I don't know about the time frame on this. The plaintiff is named as Jane Doe, so obviously this person is, preserving their anonymity, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it's hard to know from Blizzard's statement, or Activision Blizzard's statement, is the plaintiff. Does that mean that when they got sued that they opened an investigation and
I
don't quite know how the time lines up here. I think I tried to do a little bit of research here. LinkedIn was not super informative, but I think Miguel Vega probably worked for Activision. I don't know exactly what product at Activision. So this is this is like product management type of staff, and this is like a supervisor supervisee kind of situation, and it's just gross. It's typical, and it's more recent than some of the stuff in the lawsuit from last year. And you remember one of the kind of dodges that Activision Blizzard corporate leadership tried to say was like, this isn't who this company is anymore, and these allegations are old and blah blah blah. These incidents reported, I think, were in 2019 or 2020. So That would have been very recent compared to the lawsuit being filed in July of 21. I mean, I don't know. It's more heat on Kotick. Kotick was obviously aware of what was going on across the entire, blanket of Activision Blizzard companies and studios. He's kind of credibly accused of being involved in abuse himself. I don't know what might happen with a lawsuit like this in terms of, remuneration or whatever for the plaintiff or anything like that. But, it's obvious that these were not isolated incidents. All of this stuff that Activision Blizzard corporate leadership tried to say in the initial wake of the big lawsuit from California DFEH last summer, I mean, it was clearly fabricated. They knew they were lying about it because they knew that all this stuff was happening repeatedly, and they knew that it wasn't ancient history or something like that. They had been under investigation for a while that they were obviously aware of. It's, it's all just one long chain of just, dereliction of duty, just not running the company the right way and not protecting their people, not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And you got to think that's because that's the kind of environment that management liked.
Yeah, I have to. I mean, my biggest factor in this is what you already mentioned of the timing at when this took place. Did this take place after the complaint came forward to the company, or was it after the lawsuit took place? What was the
termination? You mean?
Yeah, the termination of Vega. That to me is the big question. And it's important to clarify. Like, the moment we received a complaint or a concern in this matter, we investigated, and the individual was terminated within 10 days. Versus the moment we realized that someone was suing us, that got enough attention that then we decided to do something about it. And you're like, oh.
The moment that we started identifying this person as the plaintiff, then we launched an investigation.
Exactly, right? Yeah. All right. Anyways, what'd you get up to this past week in World of Warcraft, sir?
It was a big week of WoW for me, but it was spread out a bit more broadly than typically. A little bit less retail. We did, heroic Fated raid. We ended up having just a terrible time with Sylvanas for whatever reason. She had Creation Spark, which for the last 3 months we've just been talking about how Creation Spark feels so bad. It doesn't really help very much with Sylvanas either. Like, it's just not compared to like Protoform Barrier or even Emitter or something where the entire raid gets a big buff. It wasn't really helping us like speed up the fight at all. It was just creating another there's a lot of mechanics on Sylvanas. I don't know if you noticed. Having another thing you have to pay attention to dispelling and standing in, it doesn't feel great. So most of night one was like dying on the 12-minute long Sylvanas fight. That didn't feel great, but we pushed through it, and we got some other bosses done before the end of the night. Night 2 of raid, Wednesday, we went in. First thing on the agenda was Sepulchre achievements. Those were great. We finished them up pretty fast. We're doing normal mode, non-fated, so very easy tuning. And they were very simple. The Anduin one is like there's a couple different memories around the raid zone you have to click on, and that makes it a different ad spawn in the phase 1 when you go downstairs from Kingsmore and Hungers. It was trivial, obviously, doing normal, non-fated at this point. There's a little matching puzzle you have to do during Among Us on Lords of Dread that was, somebody had already done it actually previously when we weren't even doing achievement runs. Like, somebody just went and did it before, so they did it again. Ragalan is like stand on these particular spots in the room when the fight starts, and then you get this debuff, and it creates like a couple other little affixes. And then the jailer is like, you have to use the bomb to get knocked up into the air to destroy these spheres that are around the room. And that one was a little tricky because people just had to get used to kind of the timing and how to set up. But we had those 4 done in like inside of an hour, and then we went back to Heroic Sanctum and cleaned up the rest of that ID. And then it was like, all right, well, let's probably take the rest of the week off, right? Like, we have a clear Heroic ID. We have our achievements done. It seems like a good week of raid. So that was raid.
Yeah. We had a similar thing of where it's scaling back more and more as far as the schedule goes for how much our team is raiding each week. We have pre-patch coming soon. It's sounding very much like we're just doing skips at this point, and then even next week, depending on what next week looks like, with if that is a patch week or not a patch week or what the plan is. I think we're probably just like scaling right back down to, hey, do we even raid this week, or do we just give people time before Dragonflight launches to really unwind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good call because it's going to ramp up so much when there's new stuff to do.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I mean, I think I'm having fun just keeping stuff going with the team and people who want to show up, you know, and if they don't want to, like, I don't have any goals. So, you know, I'm not going to put any pressure on anybody. You know, I've still been doing a lot of Keystones. Last week might have been the last week that I do 8 Keystones. I might be done. I might not do it this week. But I've been having such a great time with the system, and that's why. The one thing we did was we did a lower Kara for the couple guys on our team that don't have the 20 timed, and we didn't get anywhere close because we died on Adamant a lot. That fight is really hard on High Tyrannical. But the good thing is I think we learned some stuff that will help if we get a chance to go back in and do it, especially on non-Tyrannical, because you can outrange Shared Suffering. Shared Suffering is brutal to deal with, especially you know, when you have so much motion on that fight and there's so much area denial, and then if you have any other affixes that are causing any kind of disruption, it gets out of hand fast, and a small mistake with Shared Suffering and suddenly 2 people are dead or whatever. But you can outrange it if your tank, it can kind of like get out of the way. So I just kind of pulled them to one far side of the room, waited for the cast to start. As the cast was finishing, leap away, and then I could kind of kite them around the outside edge of the encounter area long enough, because it's a time. He's got like a hard 40-second timer in the off the horse phase, and once it hits 40 seconds, no matter what he's doing, he jumps back on the horse. So if you can kite him and just avoid that cast, it saves a ton of damage. It's a little rough with melee DPS in the group because it's downtime for them. If somebody's nearby, like, he's going to cast it, but I think if we get another crack at it with the guys that we have on our team that don't have lower 20 in time, I think we got a good shot at it because everything else felt good. And speaking of dungeons, I ended up spending quite a bit of time in Keystone Dungeons on beta this past week, which was really fun because you could just make a template tune on the max level realm. You could buy your set pieces. You could buy some decently high item level PvP gear, and then for the Keystone testing, you just talk to an NPC that ports you to the dungeon, and it scales you to a certain item level inside. So the new dungeons are just gorgeous, just like stunning. They're so cool looking. The new spell effects look great. The new creatures are so cool. Tuning felt a little rough, and you know, we had like some people, like we had to pug at least one person in, and sometimes it was hard to communicate with them, or like they would just leave after a boss wipe, and it's like, we're here to test the dungeon. Like, we're not trying to like crush the timer, up our rating. Like, we're not going to get loot that matters. That was weird, having leavers almost all the time. But, you know, also we had somebody trying out an evoker and just doing like desperately sub tank damage, just not really, like, things not clicking for like what needed to happen, which made everything feel worse. But man, like, I think the atmosphere of the dungeons is really cool. The bosses seem pretty interesting. They have some kind of novel effects and really made us think about how to solve some of these puzzles at first glance. And playing Prot Warrior inside a situation where I'm actually taking damage, things are actually threatening, it felt great. Like, it felt really fun to play. It felt powerful. I had a lot of options, and I think that's, you know, the big upshot of the talent system is you can build out for like, okay, what am I going to run into in a dungeon? And these things are important. So that was awesome. That was really fun. And I haven't done that much like end game on a beta in a long time. So that was really cool. I even squeezed in some classic last week. I finally finished Howling Fjord. So after only 3 weeks of Wrath of the Lich King being done, I'm level 72 and finished with the first questing zone. So obviously a classic pro over here.
Well, I mean, you're certainly doing the pacing that I think I would be looking to do. I think taking it really easy and playing it in the hours where you just feel like playing it is certainly the way to go.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing. Like, I'll pick it up if I feel like playing it, and I'll do like a hub, and then I finish the hub, and I'm like, okay, I feel good. But
yeah, you
know, when Burning Crusade came out, I didn't touch it for a year and a half or a year plus. So,
right.
You know, this is something that feels cool to do in downtime, or if I don't feel like playing retail or whatever. It just feels better to play, and it feels more rewarding. So it's cool to have that little thing on the side.
Yeah. All right, let's hop into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft. All right, this week is the Cataclysm Time Walking event, meaning the Sign of the Destroyer buff is up, increasing Cataclysm reputation gains from combat and quest by 50%. And of course, End Time, Blackrock Caverns, Lost City of Tolvir, Stonecore, Vortex Pinnacle, and Throne of Tides are your 5 different dungeons that you can, actually it's 6 different dungeons that you can run. And if you complete 5 of these, then you get yourself a cache of normal faded loot. Kind of a cool thing to pick up from one of the raids, so certainly worthwhile doing. The Time Walking Firelands is also part of this. If you talk to Vormu and Orgrimmar or Stormwind, you can access a group of 10 to 30 player Firelands, which is kind of neat, dropping some 252 loot, but just a good time to go back and do something, old school with friends. This is definitely one of my favorite raids, so certainly worthwhile checking out.
Yeah, Firelands is a great one, and I think it's one of the better raids that translates to Time Walking as well. I mean, granted, it's the newest raid, so that kind of makes sense that you can time walk. But I think the way it's laid out, it has sort of an unconventional, like non-linear layout. That's kind of cool for time walking because, like, maybe you don't want to clear it, you just want to go in and do a couple bosses or whatever. If you want to change your pace for your raid week, like that's a great option. It's really, we talk about timing on this stuff a lot, and I feel like this is really good timing for a time walking raid because maybe you want to hang out with your friends and play WoW, but like, we're on the verge of a season roll and a pre-patch, and maybe that current stuff doesn't seem too appealing, but this could be fun. Make it faded, though. Put Protoform Barrier on every boss in there and make it drop faded loot. Let's go.
Let's have the speed them up, slow them down debuff in there.
Just put Protoform Barrier
just
on
barrier?
everything.
Okay, just barrier. Okay.
Everything has barrier. Yeah,
just barrier.
It all just dies in 90 seconds. That's what I want.
I'm down with just barrier. That's fine. All right, Oribos quests. Obviously, you're a New Deal quest that you want to pick up along with Patterns Within Patterns down there in Zereth Mortis, and get that quest done for the week if you're still trying to finish up some goals involving Anima and some of the reputations involved. The PvP brawl for the week is Shadowpan Showdown. That's the Tiger's Peak Arena, and basically you race to control the center point to activate one of 2 bosses, and the first team to kill the other team's boss wins. So it's the PvE PvP one that you get into where it's kind of cool. You basically each have your own robot you activate, and they fight each other, and you can heal your robot and damage the opponents, and you're trying to mess up the other team while they're doing it, and it's a good time. It's a very interesting brawl. It's the most brawly of brawls we've seen in a while, so certainly we're checking out.
It almost seems like something could be its own mode,
Yeah, basically.
Other games have kind of put that in over the years, like a PvPvE thing or a PvEVP, where like you have a PvE thing like objective, but you're sort of directly competing against another team of players to complete it faster or better or whatever.
Yeah.
That could be something really cool for WoW because WoW is such a great co-op game and the PvE is so good. I think, you could expand on this concept of Shadowpan Showdown and make it more of a thing. But then again, you always run into the thing of like, how much room do you have in WoW to do stuff and how much time do you have as a player?
All right. A Mythic Plus dungeon where 2 teams zone in at the same time, and when they start, it starts the timer, but there's a wall that divides them throughout most of the dungeon that occasionally has openings where they can screw with each other.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. It's kind of like there's a mode called Gambit in Destiny 2 that's kind of like that. It's not totally dissimilar from like a Destiny Strike, like their version of a dungeon. Basically, it's more simplistic than that, but you fight like waves of enemies, and then every so often a portal opens up where you could send one player from your team over to the other team's instance and shoot them.
Oh,
so
I see.
I
was thinking more of like pushing awesome shelves over to get in the way of people, so they have to clear out debris before they can move forward. Like you get ahead of the other team, and there's ways to, spill oil all over the ground. So suddenly or sticky stuff. So suddenly people move slower for 20 yards trying to get through this mess that the other team's made for them, like that kind of thing.
It would be like 2-player Dr. Mario when you get like 3 lines cleared at once and then you dump the extra pieces on the other guy.
Exactly.
Yeah. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking of.
As long as you were winning. If you weren't winning, it would be terrible. But if you were winning, it would be awesome.
I think it would be interesting to watch. I think that would make it would basically make that split screen, what we see for the MDI and whatnot, actually work in the sense of the 2 teams are in the same place and they can affect each other. That to me is way more interesting to watch, especially if there's like catch up mechanics that happen too when it comes to, okay, this one team's gotten to this point before this team got to that point, so the floor opens and they can like take a shortcut tunnel or something. Would be kind of an interesting thing to do. Like that would be cool to see. So yeah, I think there could be some potential development there if Blizz is listening. That would make that a really neat experience for some esports. But we'll see what they do. Anyways, Orianna Monos, the Ever-Branching, is the big Tiernan Ardenweald that is got some memories for you this week. Not faded, though. Just keep that in mind. Jason, which memories is Orianna Monos got for people?
So Orianna Monos is the world boss of the magical forest. So you have stuff that is either magical or a forest or both. You have Fevered Incantation for mages, Surging Shots for hunters, and Verdant Infusion for druids. So, you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and say it. It doesn't matter anymore. You don't have to worry about it. The time for worrying about it is over. The season's almost done. Pre-patch is imminent. You're not going to care if you have these memories because you're not going to use a legendary soon anyway.
Fine.
So, don't beat yourself up about it, I guess is what I'm saying. Do it if you want to, but don't take a long, hard look at yourself in the mirror and go, where are my legendary memories? It just doesn't matter. You let it go.
All right. If you don't have it by now, then probably not very high on your priority list. Morgeth, the Tormentor of the Damned, is also up, obviously, but not faded. And of course, Antros is your faded boss for the week, dropping that extra higher level cloth legs and helm, leather feet and chest, mail, waist and wrist, and plate, helm, and chest. So if any of those interest you and perhaps you want to catalyze them into tier pieces, feel free to do so. Although we'll talk a little bit more about tier pieces later in the show. Something that is a bit interesting that's going on with them. All right, Mythic Plus affixes for the week are Fortified, Spiteful, and Necrotic, meaning non-boss enemies have more health and inflict increased damage. Fiends rise from the corpses of non-boss enemies and pursue random players, and all enemy melee attacks stack a Blight that inflicts damage over time and reduces healing received. Okay, so this is an ugly trash week. I'm just putting that out there. Stuff has more health and increased damage, and when it dies, it comes back, and you have to kill it again, because otherwise, in some situations, you can't progress farther through the dungeon if there's something that you need to do out of combat, if you need to go stealth, if you need to do whatever it is strategy-wise. And while those extra long-living, harder-hitting mobs are up, they're also applying a stacking blight that reduces healing received and makes you take additional damage. So, yeah, this is just, it's an ugly trash week. It's a week where bosses are going to feel great because you're not going to be dealing with Spiteful. You're going to have to deal with Necrotic, but in most situations, you have ways of getting rid of those Necrotic stacks since the timer on them is fairly short, and there's some other abilities that can remove them. And Fortified obviously doesn't affect bosses, which means that, yes, it's going to be a great week for those particular dungeons where bosses might be the troublemakers for you, but it's going to be a slog to get through a lot of the trash. So just keep that in mind for this week.
Yeah, it is a little gnarly trash week, but I don't think it's too bad, especially if you go with some ranged DPS, because you'll have more time to, beat up the ghosts or reposition away from them.
Yeah.
It can be kind of tough, like if a bunch of enemies all die within the same couple GCDs and then the ghosts all spawn, it can be hard for Melee to identify, one is targeting me. Oh, it's this one. Oh, that's really close to me. Oh, I'm dead, right?
Yeah.
That's not good. They never target the tanks. So the tanks can kind of try to direct traffic to some degree, pull stuff back away from the group as it's dying or whatever, just to give people that extra little moment to recognize what to do. But yeah, Spiteful, obviously Fort makes trash just live longer, and then, Spiteful increases the duration of trash that much further. It's not a terrible on-death effect in terms of pacing and chain pulling, though, because it just kind of is what it is. You got to deal with it. You can CC the Spiteful ads, but it's not a thing like bolstering where you really don't want to pull high-health mobs into low-health mobs. You can do it. You just have to watch what you're doing.
Yeah, it does the thing that I often referenced a lot all throughout BFA and into this expansion of, it doesn't change your route, which is what I like. I like it when Mythic Plus affixes don't change the route that you're comfortable with inside of a particular dungeon. So that is very helpful. Whatever you're comfortable doing and your team does most often, or your group or you or whoever does most often, you can just keep doing that thing and that will work fine. It's just you have to be a little bit more attentive to the amount of damage that's coming in for players.
Yep. Yeah. This also might be our last time seeing Necrotic for a while. I'm not sure what the postseason rotation is going to look like, but we know Necrotic is not going to be in Dragonflight Season 1.
Yeah.
So this might be our last or second to last time we see Necrotic on live for quite some time here, which is kind of weird to think about because Necrotic's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
It's one of the oldest affixes. I don't think it's too bad anymore, but then again, I also play a warrior, so it's very easy for me to leap out of stuff and then charge back into the group, and my stacks drop off, and everything's fine. It has very little interplay with Spiteful because Spiteful ads hit you really hard. You don't want to get hit by them. Your necrotic stacks are going to be the least of your worries if a Spiteful ad is beating on you. It has like minor interaction with the boss, like you mentioned, but most bosses, even though some of these are older bosses, most of them have like long enough animations, and they kind of change the logic of like how fast necrotic stacks up. You're probably not going to hit a situation where on non-tyrannical bosses that, you know, my tank has become overwhelmed by necrotic stacks. They are now unhealable, and there's no way to drop the stacks. Like you're probably not going to run into that. So that's good. Yeah, I mean, I think bosses are going to feel amazing because there's just so little interplay with the affixes that the overall group needs to worry about. But you might have some time pressure because trash is going to take a while. Even if it's clean, it's going to take a while, right? Because of the Spiteful element. But overall, I mean, I think as long as your tank is confident with necrotic and maybe like some positioning things or CC things with Spiteful, like a thing I like to do if I know a bunch of ghosts are going to pop is, you know, wait till I have plates for him and drop Shockwave, and that's like a 3-second AoE stun. It just something, you know, a little something just to call players' attention to, okay, these things are out now. I better reposition. I better target them or whatever. You know, if your tank can provide that kind of stuff to the team, that I think that goes a long way to helping people work with that affix. So I don't know. This is one of those weeks where I look at it and go, this is a week that pressures tanks. Bring it on. This is what I'm here for. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like let it be simpler for the rest of my team. Let them kill stuff and heal me, and I'll figure out moving around the dungeon and protecting myself. I love those kinds of weeks. But you know, if you're trying to like learn how to tank, it might be a little bit more intimidating this week. But I mean, overall, I'll take it. I don't think last Fort week we had was like explosive or something, and that can get really annoying because it's so much lost up time and target switching while you're already in combat with mobs that live longer. This Fort week is just going to be kill stuff. Like you have to do some target switching, but not like explosive.
Yeah. Hallow's End is currently live. It's going to run until November 1st. And of course, that means that the Ember Court has the additional buff that you can gain to gain additional reputation stuff, which is pretty great. It also means that the Visions of Sardonathrius permanent addition mode to the mode is up and going, so be sure you can check that out. The 10% increased buff for experience for 2 hours from the Wicker Man outside of Stormwind and Undercity is also something you can collect, and of course we have Winds of Wisdom going, so all sorts of experience increases if that's something you're interested in. There's the quest chains for it, there's costumes for it, there's pets, there's pet disguises, toys, and of course the event boss, the Headless Horseman, which can drop the Horseman's Reins, as well as a Magic Broom, the Sinister Squashling Pet, Hollowed Helm, the Horseman's Horrific Hood, which does its Horseman's Yell when you want it to, and of course the Sinister Slicer, if that's something you're looking to get. This is the Halloween event. This is what people are down for. And I will remind you of one other thing, the big tip that we like to give every year, because people forget this exists. You can get additional tricky treats, and you can decorate your garrison. Don't forget about your garrison, guys. That's an old school thing.
That's true.
If you want additional tricky treats, if you want to be able to get all the things quickly, go back to your garrison. You can decorate it in Halloween this time of year. You can have it stay that way for the entire year if you want it to, if you ever want to revisit that area. But more importantly, yes, there is additional tricky treats to be had if you go back to Warlords of Draenor and your garrison.
Yeah, it's one of the 2 times a year to go to your garrison, basically. Wintervale being the other one. But yeah, I mean, this is one of the biggest holiday events. It's got the most stuff to do, the most rewards to collect and whatnot. The best holiday boss, like just straight up, right? I don't think that's controversial. I think Headless Horseman is the coolest holiday boss. Garrison dailies are a great call. Val'sharah, there's a daily out there. Don't forget about that. That'll get you some tricky treats and also some Witch Hat Mog if you don't have it. So go back to Broken Isles for that one. There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff to do. There's a lot of stuff to buy, and it's really expensive. So I got to check and see. I think I mentioned last week, I don't think there's anything on my list for this year, so I probably won't be doing Hallow's End stuff. But like, if you're just getting started with it, you pretty much have to pick like one thing per tune that you're going to do and just go for it. Like you are not going to check off the list in 1 year of Hallow's End at this point, because it just added too much to it over the years, which is awesome. But it's, there's a lot. And as far as like, I don't know what item level the Horseman loot is going to be. I doubt it's going to be relevant anyway. Like it's usually not, and we're so far away from recent content releases that like I don't think there would be any reason to like try to farm the Horseman boss for the rings or whatever to, I don't know, try to gear your character up. Like there's got to be better ways to do that. I don't know what they are, and we can't get into the game right now to check. So, you're probably just there for the mount or maybe the hood or something. But yeah, well, I mean, one of the best, probably Hallow's End is probably the best holiday in the game because of the amount of different stuff to do. The quests are pretty fun. There's also, there's a bunch of different places to go to do stuff on a regular basis, to take part in the holiday activities, which is, to me, that's fun to like travel around different places of the world and actually like use the world in the game to express the event. Like I like that part of it. I don't know. I think it's, it's an example of a holiday done right. Although I'm kind of glad that they don't do this for like every in-game holiday, because I think it would be too much. Like if you were doing this every other month, what you do with Hallow's End, it would get old fast, I think. So I'm good with it being restricted to like this one and Wintervale.
Yeah, the larger holiday events are a lot of fun, and I think the ones that they chose have made a lot of sense. So I'm good with that. Okay, Season 4 is ending this week, as Jason mentioned at the top of the show, so we just want to make sure everyone's aware of what happens when that happens. So there's not only the initial, hey, it's ending soon post, but there's also a little update on things that are going away that we'll talk about in a second. So basically, Season 4 is closing on October 25th. This is what you can expect. The current Season 4 PvP season will end at 10 p.m. Pacific time, the night before maintenance begins in each region. This 10 p.m. Pacific time for North America, and 10 p.m. CEST for European realms. So I guess it's 10 p.m. for those, two areas. With the season's end, it will no longer be possible to earn PvP seasonal rewards, titles, and Shadowlands Season 4 rankings. As far as Mythic Plus stuff goes, the current Mythic Plus season is ending at, same thing, 10 p.m. The night before maintenance in the region begins. This is 10 p.m. for North America, and of course, 10 p.m. CST for European realms. With the season's end, ratings that qualify for the 0.1% Shrouded Hero of Shadowlands Season 4 achievement will be recorded, and the title Shrouded Hero will be rewarded in the weeks following the season's end. So that's another thing right, of course, the big old caveat. Don't faction change until you get your rewards. Wait until you get your rewards. That's very, very, very important. All right? Now, the update that we got on the things to do in Shadowlands when you're mostly dead was that the Mythic Plus rewards obtainable will be obtainable after Season 4 ends. This means like your portals and whatnot are actually still going to be obtainable after Season 4 ends. And this is the huge clue, if anyone picked up on it, that we might not be getting patch right at next week. This is the big clue of, hey, we might have a week or two of downtime between Season 4 ending and pre-patch happening. And during that downtime, you could still earn some of these rewards, so it gives players something to do when it comes to that sort of thing. So we don't necessarily know for sure if pre-patch is happening next week, but this is one of those breadcrumbs that I see when they do updates where I go, oh, maybe we have a week of downtime between the season end and pre-patch. Maybe we have 2 weeks. We'll see what happens with it. So again, later today, maybe we'll get some more announcements from the dev team, but for now, that's sort of the only breadcrumb we have.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they did this because I think there's still value in some of the stuff that you can get in Season 4 Mythic Plus. Like, even the mount, like if you didn't finish Keystone Master yet, that's something that people probably want to do or shoot for. And it should be, I mean, usually when we get into like the pre-patch mode and stuff, like usually the PvE content gets easier relative to the way it was previously. Not always, and sometimes it goes the other way, but I got a feeling with this one and with the amount of power that's coming in through the talent system that, if you're working on a particular thing in the Mythic Plus system, that you'll probably have a better time with it after the patch. So, I think this is this was good news in relation to the season ending next week. And yeah, I don't know. To me, I'm still on the fence in terms of, you know, whether we're looking at next week or the first for patch. It's definitely going to be, you know, I think it's going to be one of those two, because I don't think they're going to run to pre-patch for less than a month, or less than 4 weeks, I should say. That's pretty typical, but yeah, it would be nice to know for sure. But yeah, the good thing is, if you're like, I'm just a little bit rating short of this thing I wanted to do, and I'm not going to have time to play this week because of reasons, then you still got time for that. So that's great. And then really, outside of the the title rewards are going away for Mythic Plus and PvP. The only other, everything else pretty much is going to go away once like the expansion's out. Really, like there's not any anything else to be like, oh, I need to get this done or else I can't do it until expansion, which is the 28th. So November 28th. So you still got a month and a half on that. Like, if you need the Slime Cat mount, or you want, you know, the Jailer mount or mounts, Sylvanas mounts, anything like that, you will still have time on that stuff. So yeah, I don't know. I'm glad they did this. I do want to mention one thing that occurred to me this week while I was doing stuff on beta and PTR, which I think is probably a good thing to do as part of your prep for season end, pre-patch, etc., because you have the export strings for your talent build and your UI. One thing I spent some time doing this weekend on I went and copied my account data over to PTR, and I set up a UI and exported the string, and I set up a talent build and exported the string. And if it all works right, when patch comes out, I should be able to just import that stuff into the live game and at least be able to hit the ground running. You know, have a build and have a UI set up that works, and then I don't have to spend time when I could be playing WoW doing that stuff. So that might be a good thing to put on your checklist for, you know, impending pre-patch, is to hop onto PTR, set that stuff up, and grab the strings, because it's like way more fun to do that now when you can't play the new stuff and you're waiting for it, than to be, you know, tweaking it once the new stuff is here.
No, it's a good tip for sure, and it's something everyone has access to since it's all about PTR. So yeah, if that's something you're willing to sit down and do, and maybe it's something to fill some time this week, I think that will save you some time when the actual stuff rolls out live for sure. It's a good call. Okay, Eternity End class sets to become legacy gear in Dragonflight pre-patch. So yeah, typically tier sets, they at least go one tier, if not more than one tier, before their powers start to fade and become legacy. And basically, when a tier set becomes legacy, the powers of them are so diminished that they're not really usable. They basically aren't getting a bonus from them anymore, is what it comes down to. But with the way that they've redesigned all of the talent systems, often in some cases they actually rolled some of the tier set bonuses into your talents, to avoid ridiculous imbalance and weird double dipping stuff that's going to happen with tier sets. They're basically saying, yeah, we're just going to make them legacy when pre-patch hits. So this also means if you're someone who's been wearing tier sets because it's a tier set, and you're someone who really wants to goof around and be the best prepared you can be for pre-patch, you should probably start hanging on to pieces of gear that are not tier sets that you can equip that have better stats for you when it comes to secondary stats, item level, that sort of thing, because we're going to see all these things start to get turned off when pre-patch hits. And not that it's a big deal in any way, shape, or form, because obviously you're going to be gearing up so quickly inside Dragonflight, you're going to replace everything very quickly anyways. But it is something for those who want to really min-max their character to be able to think about of, hey, you know what? My tier set pants have this terrible secondary stat on them, but I have to wear them because my legendary is inside of another tier slot, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is one of those cases where you can find another pair of pants and start using them again once pre-patch hits, because the tier set bonuses are going away. So that's something to just everyone be aware of.
Yeah, it might present some opportunities to allow you to shuffle some gear around, which could be nice. You know, I mean, obviously, is stuff mission critical at this stage of Shadowlands life cycle? Not really, but like still, if you want maybe more of that secondary or whatever, then you can swap it around. I saw some pretty disappointed reactions to this, and like, I kind of understand that, I guess, but also I fully expected that they would be doing this. I was, I guess, if anything, I was surprised by how long it took them to just confirm this, because yeah, many current set bonuses are being rolled into talent trees, and
The double dip.
yeah, and just on a level of like some degree of equity, like my set bonus is becoming a talent. So if they didn't turn the set bonuses off, right, then does my set bonus just essentially do nothing if I have the talent selected, or am I in effect like missing out on a talent choice because I already have it on a set bonus or whatever? But I mean, balance is a whole other story, and they're not going to be tightly balancing this content. I understand that, but just on the balance, not in numerical terms of throughput, but in terms of like what feels fair and what feels like everybody is getting exciting new stuff to play with, I think this is the right call. Like, if you haven't looked at the trees really yet very much, or you haven't read about them, like there are a lot of familiar effects that you will know from recent set bonuses, from conduits, from Azerite traits, from various set bonuses of the past, legendary powers, stuff like that. You know, a lot of these things have made their way in as talents, which is just like an absurd amount of power to be able to grab from just a thing that you get naturally from leveling up. You know, it was stuff that used to take a lot of hoops to jump through to get some of these effects, you know, like crafting a Shadowlands rank 7 legendary versus choosing a talent, right? These are kind of the way these trees are built. So I mean, personally, I like that clean break at the beginning of a new expansion, new version patch, all that. You know, I want to leave the old stuff behind, create it all out, turn it all off. Let's do the new stuff. That's what's exciting to me. And I think in this case, because of the way that these talent trees are built, I really don't think there's any other way you could do it. Like, I think they have to be shut off. It just in service of fair play and of everybody getting, you know, sort of this baseline of stuff to start building from.
Yeah. Now, Jason, there were a variety of blue tweets that actually came out this past week. Do you want to sort of go through a little bit of this?
Yeah, there were a couple, which is weird because it's stuff that like they usually just put like memes on the Twitter account anymore, right? Like they don't really use it for like you know, official communication very much. Like they'll link to a blog post on the website or whatever, but there were a couple little Dragonflight updates that came out via the Twitter account only. One of them is about Horde and Alliance players sharing mob tags in Dragonflight, which is going to begin with the pre-patch, whenever that is, next week or the week after or whatever. Doesn't apply to war mode, so you cannot hang out with your cross-faction buddies in war mode. You'll be killing each other. Yeah. And mobs still gray out after 5 characters have engaged. So this is a big change. You know, this is a kind of a monumental shift in the way that the outdoor world has worked. Back in the day, mob tag was for whoever tagged it and their party, if there was one, right? Didn't matter if you were same faction, that mob is gray for you now if you didn't tag it first. And then that changed, I don't know when. Cataclysm, maybe? I can't remember. My memory's starting to get fuzzy because I'm playing Wrath Classic and there's stuff in there that I go, Wrath still work this way? So it's hard to know exactly when, but they changed it so, you know, I guess it's like, you know, 5 tags of players of the same faction can engage with the mob, and then it grays out. And it's been that way for a while. But now if you're not in war mode, it's going to be whoever it is. I mean, I have mixed feelings about this because it's more convenient, obviously. It saves you a lot of time. You're not going to have that. Yeah, you're not going to have that moment where you fly up to a rare, you've been waiting for this rare or whatever, or you're just farming rares for some reason, right? You're trying to fill a bar, you're trying to complete a quest, you're trying to collect some currency or whatever. And you get there and the rare just got pulled and the bar turns gray. Yep. And now you just have to leave and come back later and hope you get the tag on it. That feels pretty bad. But also, I mean, I have enjoyed the faction-specific tags even in like non-war mode outdoor world PvE stuff because I like the texture that it introduces. I like trying to tag stuff before my competition can get it, or like helping out, you know, other players of my faction with stuff that they've tagged or whatever. It just, I don't know. It adds this like little bit of emergent gameplay without PvP that I find interesting. But I understand that players really just want to efficiently chunk through the outdoor world stuff they're doing as fast as they can, and the fact that other players are there is mostly incidental. In the past, in older versions of the game, it was like, well, everything's really dangerous and you need to party up with people or else stuff is going to kill you. And so you need to rely on each other to like survive this experience or this content, right? And I mean, obviously the game doesn't work like that anymore. So I don't know. I mean, I think it's just a sign of the times. I guess they kind of had to do it. For me and the way I like to play and what I like about the outdoor world, I don't like this, but the one thing I will say is it occurs to me that this may be some kind of precursor or baby step towards like cross-faction guilds, like opening up guild gameplay and systems more. And if that's the case, like obviously they're going to have to do this for cross-faction guilds, right? It wouldn't make any sense if you're in a party with your guildie and you're in the outdoor world and you're like tagging separate mobs and not getting credit for them. Like you need to be able to share the tag, right?
Yeah.
So this may be an under the hood change that needed to happen because they are marching towards this future of cross-faction guilds. And from that perspective, I'm willing to sacrifice basically whatever we need to in order to get cross-faction guilds in the game, right? Like, okay, I will deal with not being able to antagonize a horde player who can't tag things faster than me if it means I can have this feature.
Okay. The other tweet that came out was actually in relation to something that's been long overdue, a system that's existed for a long time. You know, you had back in the olden times, there was people waiting for a train, and there was the trainman who'd stand there with a stopwatch and would let you know when the next train was expected and what was going to be happening with it. Well, finally, something similar has arrived inside World of Warcraft, and this is in relation to boats. You now actually have an NPC on the dock who is keeping track of when the next boat is arriving for all of these different ones that set sail around the world. These timers will be in Dragonflight, so keep that in mind. But yeah, basically there's going to be a way to tell when the next ship from Stormwind to wherever or from Orgrimmar to wherever is coming in. And you'll be able to be like, oh, I have 5 minutes. Let me go make myself a snack or use the facilities or something of the sort while you wait. Or, oh, I actually only have 30 seconds, so I'll just wait here for 30 seconds as the boat arrives. That to me is excellent for players, as it would make sense that these boats that arrive on a schedule would have someone who keeps track of that schedule that could inform players of when the next one's coming in. So, perfect. Happy about this.
This is a really cool change, except it's like literally 16 to 17 years too late.
Yeah.
How much time do you spend getting on a boat anymore in WoW? Like in retail, like maybe once at the beginning of an expansion, right? Like it's great. They should have put this in a long time ago, and I'm glad to see it, but I probably will get limited use out of this at best. I don't think I'm going to be hanging out on the boats too much. And you're giving me a dragon to fly on that has like physics-based flying that I can like level up and make it fly more. I'm not taking the boat if I can help it.
Well, I will say that it's one of those nice nods that I'll certainly appreciate every time I do ever have to, even if it is in the rare opportunity where I do use a boat.
Yeah, they should put this in Wrath Classic. They've already changed a lot of stuff in Wrath Classic, right? It's more of like a remixed version of Wrath in a lot of ways. And that might be a little bit flippant. I'm not trying to insult what they're doing, but they're trying to like make changes to modernize Wrath Classic a bit more and not just ship the exact same thing from back then.
Yeah.
Boat timers would be a perfect thing to have in Classic because you need the boats in Classic frequently. So, I mean, I don't think that wouldn't do a lot of harm to put that even in like Classic era realms. I don't know. Would that be too far over the line of #no changes for Classic era if the dock master told you how long it was going to be till the next boat? I don't think so.
No. All right. Last but not least, there are some Dragonflight beta development notes that went up. Obviously, cross-faction has now been enabled for the rated solo shuffle. So if you're someone who wants to play a match with or against each other, when it comes to cross-faction, you can now actually do that. As far as professions go, the Grand Apothecary Alcator, located in Stormwind and Orgrimmar, now also sells the cosmetic class glyphs for testing on Valdrakken servers. So for those who want to play around with the cosmetic glyphs, you can do that as well. And this is something we actually mentioned on the Call-In show, which happened this past weekend. And thank you again to all those who participated in that. That was a great show. 3 extra bars were added to your action bars, and you can enable them. So you can now have, I think Jason was saying 8 or something ridiculous, like 12 or something action bars. It's
you can
just
have
silly.
8. Yeah, they added 6, 7, and 8 in this build, and it's a lot of buttons.
Yeah. So if you're someone who needed more buttons, or as I was sort of commenting on that episode, someone who wants to have smaller bars, it might be something where you only want 4 or 5 buttons on each bar, and so you have 8 bars and you space them out differently, sort of divide them out, organize them the way you want. You can actually do that now, which I think is kind of neat. You could have 1, 2, 3, 4 on one bar and 5, 6, 7, 8 on another. If you wanted to do it that way, you could, and space them out on different sides of your screen. So you don't have this giant rectangular block on your screen somewhere. You can make them smaller and neater and that kind of thing. So yeah, kind of cool.
Make a little grid of like stuff you're tracking closely and keep that near your character or something, you know, like rotational abilities or cooldowns or whatever.
Anything that lights up goes on a bar, and then that sort of, sits next to your character.
Yeah, like your proc bar, maybe something like that. Like, that could be a cool idea. You could do anything you want with it because you can put them anywhere you want on the screen without having to do anything else with your UI. You can make them as big or as small or as many buttons or as few buttons as you want. You could split them up into different rows. You could change the way they orient across the screen, It just opens up a lot of possibilities, I think, that sticking with the traditional amount of bars doesn't allow you to do, because you can make stuff that would not make any sense in a world where you needed your standard 3 bars or whatever, and then you had some other stuff, and maybe you had like a bar for whatever out of combat stuff that you would have, and it's like, well, I can't really do what I want to do with edit mode because I don't have enough bandwidth.
Yeah.
And with 3, there's some button bloat coming in Dragonflight. Button bloat was an enemy for a long time, and I think this time out they said, you know what? Buttons are fun. Let's make it easier for people to push buttons instead of worrying about button bloat, which I think is an okay direction to try. Even with all the button bloat coming, I think 36 more buttons coming in for you to attempt to bloat. I think the bars win. I think the bars defeat the button bloat here. You might have some trouble with key bindings and stuff, but you're probably not going to need to bind you're not going to need to bind more abilities than you're going to have access to action bars at this point. Like, that's not going to happen. So that's cool. I think it really opens up the whole concept of edit mode a lot. It lets you be way more sort of creative with what you want to do with your action bars and how your overall UI is laid out. So that's awesome.
Yeah, I would want to have a much longer conversation at some point about buttons in World of Warcraft and rotations and that sort of aspect of play, because I do feel like there's a certain point where it's like, all right, you have so many abilities on a character that a newer player, if you could get this down to being like 6 or 7 buttons or 8 buttons at most to actually play your class and do it well kind of thing, there'd be a much more attractive and accessible player base for World of Warcraft. And I say this as someone who has 30, actually more than that. I have 42 buttons that I use that are all keybound. Like, that's what my class is at the moment. So just, factoring that in mind, right? That like, that's the mental bandwidth I expend when I'm playing my character on a regular basis, is keeping track of all of those keybinds, including like multiple modifiers with Alt and Shift and that sort of thing, to be able to access the abilities that I want to access. My core kit is at least 12 buttons that you use in a sort of steady rotation / have to be aware of using. That's a lot for someone to sort of get into and get used to and feel as though they're playing the game quote unquote correctly or well. So I do feel like there's an aspect of World of Warcraft where it would be nice to see some more passive / proc based things and a few less buttons that are involved as far as that kind of stuff goes. But to be able to make those changes to the game, you would have to really, really affect the class fantasy for some classes, because it's important that some classes have certain abilities that have been around for a very long time. It's controversial enough when they remove things like Mark of the Wild and whatnot from the game, where people feel like that's a very fundamental thing for being a druid. And so I can't imagine, and I'm still upset that they removed Symbiosis from Druid because it was such a cool ability, but I can't imagine them trying to trim as much as I just spoke about down. Like, it'd be like saying, okay, your healer has their direct heal and their heal over time, and that's it, right? The priest version of that is a direct heal and a bubble, and that's it. Like that would be where you sort of get into the realm of how simplistic is too simplistic, and is this still appealing to a player base when they sort of trim stuff down that much. But like I said, I would want to dive into this as a longer conversation, maybe have some guests on to speak about it from different perspectives, because it's a very the amount of buttons in this game is a very interesting thing to try and I guess digest on a regular basis. If you're trying to play a new class or someone's newer to the game, it can be a lot to sort of try and wrap your head around, for sure.
Yeah, and it ebbs and flows too, right? Like the design philosophies shift over time, and one thing we heard a lot about a few years ago was about button bloat, and they wanted to streamline things and just kind of get down to the meat and potatoes of what made a class and a spec tick. And now it's kind of shifting in the other way, and they want to add more flexibility, and part of that, just by default, is if you add flexibility, then you have you're going to add more abilities, right? It's all going to expand outward. You're going to give players choices to build into more active buttons to use, and then you start going back in that direction of button bloat. So I think these things always go in cycles. WoW is a very cyclical game, and kind of certain design ideas come into fashion, and then players respond to them, and then they like them, and they get sick of them, then they want something different, and then something else cycles in, and then it all comes back around, and eventually the new thing becomes the thing that we don't want anymore, and we want the other thing back. I mean, just look at the talents in general. The new trees are very different than the old trees, but that's kind of an example of what I'm talking about. You used to have this very dense talent tree system, and you were trying to get to specific builds, and it was very inflexible. And then they replaced it with a system that was very flexible, and but didn't offer like a really much of a breadth of choice. You had certain choices you could make at certain thresholds, but really you kind of talented into the thing that was appropriate for the situation, and that was what the talent system was. And now they're sort of combining ideas from both of those philosophies into a system that is dense yet flexible at the same time, which I think is cool. And I'm sure that there will be a lot of good stuff about it, and that in 6 years from now we'll be like, man, these talent trees got to go. Like, that's just the consequence of a game with the kind of longevity that WoW has had, is that new stuff is exciting until you get sick of it, and then you want something new, and sometimes the new thing that you want is sort of a version of the way a thing used to be.
Yeah, and you just sort of hope that they don't go, okay, well, the next thing for talents is going to be the second page of talents. And so you have the first page of talents, you go to the second page, and you choose more things, right? Because then you're like, okay, are we going to get into like the Path of Exile kind of world where you have this ginormous, ridiculous, huge tree that's incredibly intimidating to players looking at it, even though once you've sort of played the game enough, you can wrap your head around it, it's not quite as intimidating. It's something that initially is, and it's that's something that certainly is a turnoff for a lot of players, which I think is something to keep in mind, which is why I talk about things like reducing that entire usable keys down to that 12 button or 8 button or whatever it is range inside a game like this would be a very interesting experiment to do, to be like, all right, how well does this work, and how much do players enjoy this? When you're like, okay, you don't have 7 different ways to heal someone, you now have 3 or 2 kind of thing, right? As opposed to, you don't have 9 or 10 different ways to do damage to something, you now have 4. Like that being a very substantial cut, but also does that make the game still as stimulating for players as it was before, or sometimes in some cases maybe even more stimulating for players? Is that easier to balance around? Is it not? It's just a larger conversation that we need to have. Okay, last thing. They added an option to play a sound when a player is in range to use the interact key. So basically, you're, hey, I want to interact with something. They added the option to turn on a sound for it, for those who I assume might find that very helpful. I'm sure there's some accessibility aspects to that, where this allows you to know that you can press that key when you have reached a particular point. I think running around a city like Stormwind might be a bit much to have something like this turned on, pinging all of the time, but inside certain dungeons or raids, I can see there being, or certain encounters even, I can see there being a use for something like this to sort of help players out.
Yeah, this is a cool addition. I feel like, am I wrong, or didn't we used to have a keybind for interact with target? I seem to remember using that.
It still is. No, that's still there. Yep.
So, but they're kind of dressing it up here a little bit because we had one before, but then they kind of maybe they changed the functionality with it or something for 10.0. But yeah, an interact key is a good thing to have, especially during like fresh content.
Yeah,
because a lot of times there's a particular thing you need to interact with, and somebody is standing on top of it on their Brutosaur, and you can't see it, even though you know it's there. You can't find the pixel that your mouse needs to be on in order to interact with it. So, yeah, the sound could definitely be helpful, but it might also be distracting in certain situations, like you mentioned. But yeah, I would encourage you to maybe think about setting up a hotkey for this in advance of pre-patch and Dragonflight coming out, because you know, you don't want to get stuck like waiting in line to interact with a thing or an NPC or something. So yeah, I remember what was it, Warlords, I think. Remember when you had to talk to Khadgar out there in Blasted Lands, and like people were just standing on them, and they were like, hey, they put like out a PSA basically through the official communication channels, like, hey, use the interact with target keybind so that you don't fail to click on the target NPC. It helps a lot when there's, you know, thousands of people in one spot.
Yeah. Okay, so we got breaking news, Jason. We got this just rolling in here. Officially, pre-patch goes live October 25th. This is going to be happening.
Okay.
So it's now been confirmed.
There you go.
This is going to come in with the talent system revamp. It's going to have the new UI changes for players. It's going to have the new accessibility features. It's going to have rated solo shuffle. It's going to have the new class and race combinations for rogue, priest, and mage. Those are all happening on the 25th. Okay. Phase 2, the second phase of pre-patch. So we're going to get that for 2 weeks. Well, actually 3 weeks is what we're going to have that for October 25th until November 15th. Because November 15th is when we get the Evoker. It's going to come in. There's going to be the Forbidden Reach zone for players to play through, the sort of new hero class Dracthyr starting zone. Uldaman, Legacy of Tyr, the new dungeon, is going to be coming inside the Badlands within Eastern Kingdoms. And the in-game event Primal Storms, where you have to ward off attacks from Primalists with new quests and world events, is going to start kicking off. And that's really the thing that sets the stage for Dragonflight. So, yes, this is the news that we've gotten so far. So yes, expect next week we're going to see the kickoff of the new talent system, UI changes, rated solo shuffle, accessibility stuff, and the new class race combinations. And then you got to wait 3 more weeks to get the Evoker kicking off in there with Forbidden Reach and the new dungeon, and of course the actual event that kicks off the expansion launch.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thanks, WoW team, for not publishing this like an hour ago. After we spent an hour talking about, well, if patch is next week, then this, and if not, then
yeah.
But I mean, yeah, this is mega exciting, and this is even more reason to get on PTR this week and get your talents and your UI set up at least a little bit, so you can hop in there when we get servers next week. It's also cool that they're doing the kind of early dungeon release, dungeon preview thing for the Uldaman rework. It kind of reminds me of one of the cool things about Warlords when that was coming out was they did the Blackwing Lair dungeon early, right? What was it? I forget what it's actually called inside of there, but there was sort of this pre-expansion event of like there was an Iron Horde orc and her sort of war band had gone through the Dark Portal and fled to Blackrock Mountain, and you could do that dungeon like early before the expansion came out. That was pretty cool. So that's awesome to see, and the in-game event should help you catch up if your gear's behind. You know, that's a bit of a tight window. I think November 15th through the 28th. That's not even 2 full weeks for that for those of us in NA to get Dracthyrs leveled up and kind of dive into some of this stuff. That's a little strange, but I mean, I'll take it. I think, you know, you're not going to have to do too much to level up your Evoker, I don't think. But that will probably be the end of Winds of Wisdom, right? They said Winds of Wisdom was going to be up until Dracthyr became available.
Yes.
So if you are working on Winds of Wisdom stuff, you now have a deadline for that, which is November 15th, or with regional, resets in your region. So yeah, very cool stuff. I'm looking forward to all this. I guess my big hope for the outset for next week is just that they just tune the PvE content into the basement and that we're just slamming through all of it because you want it to be fun, right? We got all our new toys. We want to play with our new toys. You don't want to be like, well, this toy is fun until we get the right batteries, right? Like you want to just take your new toys out of the box and play with them. So it would kind of take the shine off it a little bit if we get our tunes all set up and we get in there and we just get punched and we wipe, you know what I mean? So that's my big hope for next week and for this pre-patch window is that PvE feels good, feels tuned low and accessible.
Yep, that's the same sort of thing for me. I don't want to be working too hard to play the game here at the end of it, especially when we're learning new things about our class. So I would be down for them to, I guess, tune stuff into the ground, like you said. It might be pretty fun to do. All right, with that, though, let's play a quick sounder for our patrons, and I'll be right back. Hi, everyone. I'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today I'm giving a special shout out to Arajian, Celian, Infark, Kapawi, Mibble the Mighty, Nick, and Shorel. Thank you. This sounder is for you. Yes, we have a Patreon. It's located over at patreon.com/thestartingzone. A big thank you to our newest patron, Craig G. Thank you so much for hopping in there, supporting the show. And a big thank you to everyone who participated in this past weekend's patron episode. It means a lot to us and helps us sort of, keep the lights on with the show. So thank you so much for not only participating, but also for hopping in to support the show. It means a lot.
Yeah, welcome, Craig, and thank you, patrons, for all your support over the years. And yeah, great patron up over the weekend. We had some really fun discussion topics. So thank you for everybody who sent questions and topics and responses in. And yeah, we really appreciate it and looking forward to hearing from you again soon.
Yeah. All right, folks, if you've enjoyed this episode of The Starting Zone, consider heading on over to your iTunes or Apple Podcast. Leave us those 5-star reviews. They mean a lot to us, and we love reading them here on the show. We don't have one currently in, which means if you submit yours this week, we'll get in there on next week's episode, which should be a pretty big one given, pre-patch launch date.
Yeah, we got some stuff to cover next week.
Exactly. And that's going to wrap up episode 547 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your questions or ask, give a little bit of feedback, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com, reach out to us on Twitter, or join our Discord over at thestartingzone.com/discord. And if you want to get your hands on some TSZ gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/thestartingzone. And Jason, where can folks find you on the internet?
Best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. And you can also find me streaming WoW over on twitch.tv/Shieldwald. And I've been experimenting with restreaming to YouTube. So you can also check out youtube.com/Shieldwald. And as long as I have sufficient upstream, it appears that you can pick your channel of choice for streams. Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Sundays usually for Raid and Keystone stuff. Sometimes squeeze in some other streams on weekends or Monday nights or something. This week might be a light week because, we are really kind of winding down in the live game, but check out the stream channels.
Great. If you're trying to find me, you can find me over on Twitter at Spencer_Downey or over on Twitch at twitch.tv/SpencerHD. And with that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening and jobs done.